Hey guys, welcome back. It's officially spooky season. So to celebrate Halloween, is Halloween even something that you celebrate? I mean, it's basically a pagan ritual holiday about warding off spirits. So anyways, to celebrate the warding off spirit season, I thought that we'd take a look at some truly unsettling Halo lore that, of course, pertains to the Flood, the elite and human cults that worship them. No, I'm not kidding. These are two extremely obscure pieces of lore, both of which originate from and have only ever been mentioned in two books, Ghosts of Onyx and Cryptum. So if after this video you want to dive into the source material, then luckily for you, this video just so happens to be sponsored by our good friend Audible. Do you want to listen to an unmatched selection of audiobooks, including almost every single Halo audiobook ever released? Well, then sign up for a 30-day free Audible trial today by going to audible.com/HiddenXperia or by texting HiddenXperia to 500 if you're in the US of A. And your first audiobook and also two Audible originals are entirely free. I'll have you know, a large majority of my Flood knowledge is transmitted into my cranium via Audible. I've used it on my PC and on my phone, at home and on the go for years now to listen to Halo audiobooks and to become more and more assimilated into the hive mind. And you know what? I'd say it worked pretty well. So, if you want to gain access to both of the audiobooks that this video is based on, as well as the largest selection of Halo audiobooks on the planet, go to audible.com/HiddenXperia or text HiddenXperia to 500 in the US and join the glorious hive mind by starting your 30-day free Audible trial today. Okay, so let's start by taking a look at a small yet extreme group of Covenant known as the Governors of Contrition, first and only ever mentioned once in Ghosts of Onyx. Now, the Covenant religion itself was extreme and then some. The entire basis and end goal of the Covenant was basically Heaven's Gate but on a galactic scale, fueled by a gargantuan delusion of grandeur, and yet somehow the Governors of Contrition managed to make that seem relatively moderate. See, just like with any religion, the Covenant had fringe extremist groups that practiced more radical beliefs about the Foreigners and the artifacts that they left behind, and Contrition was one of these groups. They believed that all Foreigner creations were sacrosanct, which is fine, until you consider the fact that they believed that the Flood were a Foreigner creation. I'm sure they would have heard rumours about the existence of the parasite after the events of Alpha Halo, but when they first came into contact with them on Delta Halo, their fascination spiralled out of control. One elite that became particularly infatuated with the Flood was Tano Inanrari, the shipmaster of the Incorruptible, an ORS heavy cruiser that came to Delta Halo with Regret's fleet. Tano took the Contrition's views one disturbing step further. He believed that with the Flood, the Foreigners had created the perfect life form, and that it was their sect's religious duty to protect it. These beliefs even became so extreme that during the outbreak on Delta Halo, he ordered his cruiser to the surface of the ring to embrace the Flood and allow the parasite to come on board. It was safe to say that this dude had utterly lost his mind by this point. Now, what he thought would happen were they to come on board was never revealed, but based on his views, I think it's safe to say that he would have let them consume the entire ship, and if that were to happen, it would have drastically changed the outcome of the war for Delta Halo. With control of the Incorruptible, the Flood would have been able to use the ship to spread throughout Regret's entire fleet, and if it was able to catch them off guard, which it more than likely would have done, the UNSC forces on the ring could have been faced with not only a Gravemind and a colossal outbreak on the ring, but an entire Flood-controlled fleet staring down at them from orbit. In short, it would have ended terribly for all parties. However, clearly this didn't happen. See, Tano's crew were becoming increasingly unsettled by his devotion to the Governors of Contrition and their beliefs, and when he ordered the ship down to the ring to allow the Flood on board, a longtime friend and acolyte of his, Voronar Mantikree, decided that enough was finally enough. Like the rest of the sane Covenant, he saw the Flood as nothing more than an infection that must be cleansed, and he vowed that as long as he could breathe, no such thing would ever be allowed to happen. The contrition's views were abhorrent, and there was absolutely nothing holy about the parasite. As Tano issued the order to begin their descent, Manticore drew his needler and blew the shipmaster's brains out. With his now former shipmaster's brain and skull covering the cruiser's command console, Manticore had just committed one of the biggest acts of heresy known to the Covenant. And yet, the crew peacefully accepted him as their new shipmaster. All secretly grateful, I imagine, that their previous flood-worshipping commander that was going to feed them all to the parasite was dead. Now, as screwed up as they were, I do actually hope that some of the governors of contrition survived the war. I mean, they aren't exactly the type of religious fanatics that you want in the universe, but from a story perspective, there's some real potential there. A group of Covenants so radical that they believe that the Flood are a holy foreigner artifact, their perfect creation, and that all believers of the Great Journey should embrace them by allowing themselves to be consumed by them. I'd love to see a story similar to Shadow of Intent, where Arthas is sent to hunt down their remnants or something. I mean, it'd be perfect for him, given his hatred of the prophets, and also his incredibly storied history with the Flood. 343, please. Okay, so now that we've looked at the elite cult, let's take a look at the human cults who did a little bit more than just worship the Flood. But to do so, we've got to go back in time, around 109,000 years. That's right, throw away those history books, everything you know is false. Around 107,445 BC, the ancient humans and ancient prophets were two of the dominant spacefaring civilizations in the galaxy. They were also peaceful as well. Funny how things can change. But randomly, some ancient ships drifted into human regions of the galaxy, crash landing on their planets. Now, these ships contained nothing but vials of a fine desiccated powder, and were completely automated. After extensive testing by human scientists, they concluded that the powder was a short-chain molecule, simple, organic, and harmless. So, as you do, they began feeding it to their pets, an ancient species called the Faru that were basically that galactic era's version of dogs. Initially, it caused pretty positive behavior in the Faru, but over the centuries, it began to corrupt them. Fleshy lumps began growing on their shoulders, flexible striped rods began sprouting from their heads, and other Faru became compelled to consume these growths, sometimes even consuming the entire creature. This was an incredibly terrifying form of foreshadowing, considering that the Faru were herbivores. Tried as they did, no cure was ever found for these mutations, and the infestation spread throughout the Faru like wildfire. Despite their efforts to release them back into their natural habitat, or even euthanize them, it was too late. Soon, these growths began to manifest in humans as well, causing a sudden desire to consume the Faru. This catalyzed the spread of the infection that, by now, you should very easily be able to recognize as the beginning of the Flood. These humans had become vectors of the plague. Their mere presence was helping it spread, and the discarded tissue and limbs of those who the disease had killed were also helping to spread it. And I imagine that it'll also come as no surprise that this disease soon spread to the prophets as well, and in no time at all, large populations were succumbing to the infection. And so, the first ever Flood outbreak had officially begun. But where do the cultists come in? Well, this outbreak wasn't exactly like the outbreaks that we know of today. The victims and hosts of the parasite were infected, but they weren't turned into combat forms, nor were they used as biomass. Instead, aside from the fleshy growths and the odd tentacle, they were still human and Sanshayum, but with these new primal hedonistic urges to feed and consume that could never truly be satiated. So, using their still intact human intellect, powered by the parasite's urges to spread and consume, the human infected got together to form Flood cannibal cults. What they do is capture other uninfected humans and force them to become infected via cannibalism of another infected human. However, to maximize the spread of the infection, the sacrificial infected that the uninfected would feed on was force-fed until they grew to a massive size, increasing the amount of infected flesh that could be consumed. And if that wasn't already enough, they were also typically consumed while still alive. As more and more of these cults started to pop up, the flood infection spread throughout human-controlled space at an ever-increasing pace. Despite attempts to quarantine infected planets, the plague managed to spread to hundreds of different worlds in 15 different star systems. The pandemic was very quickly becoming out of control, and when the humans asked their captive, the Primordial, about this flood, this shaping sickness as they called it, the answers that they received were so horrifying, those present committed suicide. Eventually, however, the humans did manage to find a cure by essentially weaponizing a third of their entire population's genetic code against the flood, and then sacrificing them to the parasite, which caused it to recede. However, unbeknownst to the humans, this was not due to the cure. The flood had retreated on their own initiative. It was not yet time for humanity to be tested by the full might of the parasite. So folks, that's what happens when you start eating people infected with a new, highly contagious and lethal infection. All of this does make me wonder though, are there any other flood-worshipping cults out there? With how big and spread out humanity are in the modern day Halo universe, along with all the other species who encountered the flood at some point, there's gotta be some other insane nutjobs out there who worship them. I mean, in real life, you have those weirdos who fall in love with serial killers, and also, in other fictional universes, similar things have happened. I mean, in Lord of the Rings, after the War of the Ring, humans began founding orc cults, seemingly where they worship and admire the orcs that were driven out of Middle-earth. And in The Walking Dead, we had the Whisperers, who believed that the undead were nature's way of directing humanity back to their animalistic roots, and that we should conform with their ways of life. So to assume that there could be other flood-worshipping fanatics somewhere out there in Halo's vast, expansive universe really isn't that far-fetched. Anyways, I think that's enough cult talk for one video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget, if you want to join the hive mind, audible.com/HiddenXperia, or text HiddenXperia to 500 in the US. I can promise you the Gravemind really does make the best cookies. So, I want to give a huge thank you to all of my amazing patrons for their support as per usual, and thank you all so much for watching, I really do appreciate it. Have a spooky Halloween, and I'll catch you in the next one.